So in 2023, me and my partners opened up our own physical therapy practice right here in New York City. We spent months and months learning how to start a business and figuring out the exact documents that we needed to make sure that everything was legit. In this video, I'm gonna save you hours of researching and simply explain to you what an operating agreement is and how to create one for your business. So an operating agreement is pretty much just the rule book for how your business is gonna be run. Think of it as like a prenup, but for your business. It outlines who makes the decisions, who owns what, and what happens if things go sideways. So the mistake a lot of people make when they're just starting out is relying only on verbal agreements. And that's a big mistake because once money and stress enters the picture, all that goes out the window. And so you wanna make sure that you have written down exactly how you planned out to run your business. And I don't care if you're starting a business with your family or with your best friends, you need an operating agreement because things are gonna happen. And when emotions get high, you don't want to make decisions when you're in an emotional state. And so making sure that you have this plan written out ahead of time is super important for long-term success. So every business is going to have an operating agreement that's a little different, obviously, because businesses are all different. But there are a few bare minimum things that you have to have in your operating agreement. And so to make sure I didn't forget anything, I wrote down a bunch of them. So first, ownership percentages. Who owns how much? It's obviously not always gonna be 50-50. It might be 70-30, it might be 33-33-33, 25 if you have 4 partners. So you just wanna make sure that you have the ownership percentages written clearly in the operating agreement. Another one is capital contributions. So who's putting in what at the beginning? Whether it's cash, sweat equity, whatever it is, you definitely wanna have written in there who put in what when this business got started. Profit distribution is another one that you're gonna wanna have written in the operating agreement, especially from the start. So our profit's gonna be distributed based on the ownership percentage. So for example, if I own 70% of the business and my partner owns 30%, is that how we're gonna split the profits? It may seem obvious to some people, but you definitely wanna have that written in the operating agreement because let's say my partner who owns 30% of the business says, hey, how come you get this much? It's because we have it written down in our operating agreement. Decision making is gonna be another big thing you wanna include in the operating agreement. So when it comes to making big decisions about the business, you have to decide with your partners whether it's gonna come down to a vote. If you do decide that you're gonna use the voting process, does the vote have to be unanimous or does it have to be just more than 50%? These are all things you're gonna have to talk about and make sure you have it written down in your operating agreement. And I know when you're first starting your business, talking about things like decision making and ownership percentage may seem kind of silly because it just seems so obvious. Oftentimes, let's say you're in a partnership with one other person, you just assume you're gonna split everything 50-50, decisions are gonna have to be made unanimously between the two of you. But you just wanna have everything written down. Even if it is obvious, just write it down because you never know what's gonna happen in the future. Let's say there's an issue in the future where you both disagree with each other and one person just decides to use their solution for the problem. You can't do that because when things were good and you guys were on good terms and less emotional, you wrote down in the operating agreement that if this situation happened, this is how we're gonna handle it. And so if you wrote down in the operating agreement that things have to be a unanimous decision, well, you can't move forward with a decision until you guys agree on what that solution's gonna be. So again, we're just planning for the worst case scenario here. That's kind of what an operating agreement is at the end of the day. Because obviously when times are good, you're not even gonna remember that you have an operating agreement. But when times get tough, I think that's where the operating agreement really shines its value. It basically acts as like a GPS for your business. If you're like us and you have a brick and mortar business or a business where you're providing a service in person, there are gonna be some things that you wanna include in your operating agreement that online businesses don't really have to think about. So let's say you have a physical location and someone trips and falls. Who's on the lease and who's liable? Those are two things that you wanna have clearly written down in your operating agreement. If you have physical assets like real estate or equipment, there may come a time where these things need to be repaired. And so you wanna have written in your operating agreement who's responsible for the repairs, where the fund's gonna come from. Again, these are all things that might become potential arguments in the future, so you just wanna make sure that you solve that problem before it even happens. And so when it comes to actually writing your operating agreement, you're gonna have basically 2 options. So option 1 is you write it yourself and you all sign it. If you have partners, you all sign it. 2, you can use a lawyer to help draft you a copy and then you all just sign it. Honestly, I like both options. If you're just starting out, and your business isn't too complicated, maybe you can find an operating agreement template online. Read through it, make sure it covers a lot of the bases that we talked about. Make sure that you add in anything specific to your business that might not be included in that template. If you do that, that should be a good place to start. You can always revise the operating agreement and just re-sign it. But yeah, I think that's a good place to start for most people, is using a template and then just adding in all the things that are specific to your business. If you do decide to go with a lawyer, that's obviously a great option. You're gonna have to pay them, but it's an amazing option because one, usually they have experience and they've done this a million times. And so they're gonna be able to give you advice on what to include, because honestly, you're at a point when you're just starting your business where you don't really know what you don't know, if that makes sense. So this person, the lawyer that you hire, is gonna know pretty much everything that you will run into in the future or could potentially run into in the future. And so having them as an asset to just bounce questions off of and learn from is definitely worth the money in itself. And so whether you go the lawyer route or the online template route, just make sure that everyone signs it. Everyone meaning you and your partners, if you have them. Make sure that everyone signs it, dates it, and just make sure everyone agrees on the operating agreement. No one should come out of that feeling like they were shafted, or that, you know, these two people got a better deal than I did, or, oh no, my partner got a better deal than I did. It should really just be a formality, honestly, at the beginning. And it should be a safety plan for when things go wrong in the future. And so personally, for our business, it's me and 2 other partners. So there's 3 of us, and we're all physical therapists. And we decided to actually find an online template and fill it out ourselves. And so we found one that I'll link in the video description below if you want to look at it. We found a template, we filled it out, and we added everything that we thought was specific to our business. But then while we were going through it, we kind of had that thought that I mentioned before, like maybe there's stuff that we're missing that we just don't know at this point. And so what we did was we actually had a client who was a lawyer that had done this a bunch of times. And so we had them review the operating agreement that we wrote. Luckily they didn't charge us, which was very nice of them. But yeah, so we kind of did a combination of both. We wrote our own, we drafted our own, and then we had a lawyer revise it. And they actually did give us good advice on things that we should add in there. And so that's what we did. We did a combination of both. We drafted it ourselves and then had a lawyer review what we wrote. Now that you have your operating agreement signed and out of the way, your next step might be getting general liability insurance, which I talk a lot about in this video.